only research, annual research property of the Institute. And we are very, very fortunate because we've been having universities partner and support the research initiatives, and we have been able to sort of tap into some trends, some observations, and we'd love to know what we found, whether what we found in the report is what is going on in your schools and institutions as well. So we're going to really keep it more and more conversational, and we really want to know your views. We do have 2 copies of the physical report because we'd be happy to circulate those in case, because we haven't captured everything, every finding. Yeah, we'd be here the whole day doing that then. So just to give you a little background on, it's an annual research survey that the IC3 Institute does. This is the 3rd edition. So that's a little bit of the background. And why do we do it? Because the number of students who are making decisions is only increasing. So we want to know that what is it that students base their decisions on? How do they feel about making decisions? Who are they looking at when they're making decisions, etc. So I think it's really the fact that the number of people across countries who are falling in the age bracket of grade 9 to 12 or undergrad who are making choices is really increasing, and the number of choices have increased as well. So how is it, what is the math behind this, what is the pattern behind this is really the context, which leads us to then the purpose, that is that through this kind of data that we sort of, and the findings that we get through the survey, we want to make sure that college and career counseling in schools is based on this data, right? And also what you may be seeing in your institutions may be a micro view of your region, but we want to make sure that we're able to, get to a larger view and, figure out whether that is what is aligning with our region or that's a contrast to our region, So I think there's a lot of merit in universities, institutions, advisory organizations and bodies to really look at this data and see how can we bring more structure to this, whole concept of career and college counseling, to university outreach, to relationships, to exchange, and just bring school education and higher education more in sync. So it's like a lot of you feel, if you're from institutions, feel that students aren't ready when they come to you. So I think, there are sort of tertiary benefits flowing in if we continue to research such factors as well. Over the last 3 years, so the first survey that happened in 2020, the sole purpose was to find out the impact of the COVID situation. We had about 2,000 responses. Last year, we went deeper into the COVID impact and, built on the findings of the 2022. So if 2022 said that, country choices were being made on, let's say, weather, or the kind of institutions that are there. We sort of built further on that in 2021. And we had 3 so we looked at country, how are people making country choices, career choices, course choices, curriculum choices, right? So those were our 4 C's for last year, because those were the ones that surfaced, right? And we realized that students find it easier to think about careers rather than about college or country. And then they tend to work backwards. Yeah, so that was like a main finding from last year. How many of you, if do you work with kids, do you think, even as universities, do they first ask you about a course or a career, or do they ask you more about the institution? How does it, what would be a typical conversation with a student?
It's always a mix.
Mm-hmm.
Some students, especially year 11s and 12s, will ask for a course option.
Mm-hmm.
Some would have a destination in mind. So it's always a mix, as per my experience.
Thank you for sharing.
At school, we usually ask the students, what are you aspiring to be?
Mm-hmm.
So if you are aspiring to be that, what are all the universities that are providing you that sort of courses that you are aspiring to become? So then narrow down to the subjects, especially in 9th and 10th, we do that, where we ask them to narrow down as it goes down towards the subject selection. And then we start from here to go to which universities, we research on the universities that provide these courses, and a list of universities, and then application process about that.
Okay.
So we do a similar thing. So grade 9, 10 is basically like an exploration time.
Mm-hmm.
We will have university fairs, master classes. There's so many webinars going on. Whatever we can, so that they just sorry, thank you. So they just maybe explore those kind of career options. When they come to end of grade 10, or at least the beginning of grade 11 is the time. We even do something like the World Series. We talk to them about various countries as study destinations, pros, cons, more important requirements. What would be the prerequisites, entrance exam, those kind of things, whether SAD, non-SAD. And after that, we have this conversation with the students and the parents, because sometimes the students think in a different way, but the parents have a preference that not this, but probably only this destination. Even in a destination, if you're looking at US, they might even have a preference for an area. So that is the way we keep on going forward till we actually reach the entire final listing.
Thank you.
I think when you have a conversation with the students, you can tell if they have been counseled or not. Because when they have been counseled, they do tend to talk about the programs, talk about, what can I do afterwards, placements and things like that, and then they come to the financial aspects. When they are not, they lead with the financial aspects and the scholarships. So.
That's a very good point.
I also think it's important to understand how the conversation starts. Is a student first reaching out to you, or maybe you reaching out to the student? So for my university, and I represent California Polytechnic State University, students apply for the major. They don't apply for undergraduate admission. They have to choose a major. And what happens throughout the first year, about 1/3 of our students end up changing majors. So what they think about the major and what is the reality once they come to the university is completely different story. So when I talk about the sources, how students find you, I usually see that if student reach out to us, they already know about our institution, because we are not that visible, not only outside California, but also internationally. So they did their research and they know where they're coming. And they will ask about the majors, of course they will ask about the criteria, and the most important, they will ask about the financial aid. So those 3 important topics which we cover almost every single time.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. So, some of those you'll see those in the findings as well. So, and also we're sort of trying to build our entity as a research institute as well. So we started with a single survey, 2021. We split the survey into grade 9 and 10 and 11 and 12. First year it was the same survey. We went, we had topical questions that would be relevant to grade 9 and 10 and 11 and 12 respectively. And come 2020, we did 3 surveys and the report is here. So we did a university survey, we did a school survey, and we did a counselor survey, right? So, and how all 3 of them are coming together, so we were able to sort of also see some of the overlaps or some of the similarities as well as some of the gaps as well. And that's what we wanted to highlight today while setting some of the basic, so I've told you that there were 3 surveys, so that's new. It's not just a student survey any longer. Institution is university. We use the term institution because some say college, some say university, some say school. So just for sort of uniformity across. So also this year we had about 10,000 plus students take the survey and about 1,000 plus counselors. They may not all be counselors. Some of them would be teachers as well as counselors. Some were teachers who were transitioning into counseling, or or some were still teachers, right? So we got about 1,000 plus responses, but from the counselor survey. However, all were not counselors.
And from those 1,000 plus counselors, how many are there actually, and what's the percentage of them that you get?
So all of that is in the report. I wouldn't,
I mean, so you happy with the 1,000? It was much more than the previous year?
we never had a counselor survey or an institution survey, yeah.
But I think this year is probably a more holistic approach where we've been able to look at the three elements: the student perspective, the council perspective, and the institution perspective as well.
So we had University of Tennessee, we had Newcastle, and we had CREA partner on this. And I think because we're trying to really come to a report which is truly global in nature, we want to make sure that we have institutions in different regions that are supporting, because that's how they bring in, their regional sort of characteristics as well as the database, that also sort of widens. So that's the, idea of keeping, and each one of them took a lead on one of the surveys. And then we sort of came together to say, what are the questions, what are the same questions that we are going to ask across the surveys? What are the ones that, how are we going to thematically put that whole, converge all the three surveys together? The focus area for the students was access to counseling support, transition from, as they've transitioned from school to university, how ready do they feel? And also, what is the emotional impact of making career-related decisions? Yeah, all decisions I think that we make have some emotion or some experience or some, I don't know how many of us think that we all make logical decisions, but there is a feeling, there's a past reference, there's sometimes excitement, sometimes anxiety about what decisions. So we just wanted to ask students, how do they feel when they're making decisions, right? Because this is probably one of the most critical decisions that they're making at this age. Yeah, there may be many, many more critical later on as well. From the counselors, we wanted to check what are the patterns of students' choices. So is it that there are a particular set of subjects that are more popular, there are particular majors that are more popular? Are there those students from a particular subject stream that look at studying within the country or outside of the country? Challenges of the profession, what are some of their support and training needs? Because the idea of the report is also this is the first time in the report we also have a recommendation section. So there are recommendations for each category, because the idea is for this report is to go out and, have, again, like I said, universities and schools support each other in the best way that they can. For the institution, it was what are the patterns in applications and enrollments? How is their access to schools and students? And what have been some of their recent adaptations in their approach to increasing access, to outreach, and some of those. So that's a bit of the overview of the whole study. We'll structure the presentation in a way that we first cover a gist of, or very sort of top 2-3 highlights of each survey, and then we'll show you how those sort of came together. Yeah. So the first is the student survey. And if you see, this is how often they meet their counselors. And the surprising thing is that majority have not met their counselor, okay? But that's also because context is that less than 50% of the schools had full-time counselors. So therefore, this is not, it's not like all schools have counselors and they still haven't met, right? So this is the percentage of students who sort of have not met simply largely because they don't have a dedicated counselor in school. Yes, you had a question.
I just have a question. Do you know what is the average number of students per counselor you have?
Yeah, we'll have that, right, coming up. So that could be the other reason as well. So, so less than half of the students surveyed indicated that they had a dedicated counselor. But most interesting is also that 25% of the kids actually didn't even know whether they had a counselor or not. Okay, so that comes to also how is counseling being positioned in school, what is the availability of the counselor, the ratio, etc., right? Of those who had dedicated counselors, 61% had met the counselor, right? Of these 61%, 94% of the students found conversations with the counselor useful. So I think there are levels of filters here, right? One is that the first large statement is that, well, the reality is less than 50% of the schools have counselors, right? Even if they have counselors, 25% of the kids don't know whether counselors are there or not. So that's further limiting the number of students who would approach a counselor, right? However, the 61% that are actually coming are 94% of them are finding the conversations useful. So I think which is the encouraging sign, but so yeah, it's working, but the larger, you know, the number of people, the number of schools that are believing in counseling or actually making the effort of a human resource is what is a little alarming, you know, because, and also another caveat here actually, Gurpreet, which I realized last night was that because the survey went out in majority of the IC3 network, you know, where there are considerably schools that have counselors, so actually even if you have 51% of the schools that have counseling, it may not be representative of the actual situation because the survey is going out to, you know, schools that have been in touch with IC3 at some point or the other, right? So I think it may not be truly representative of that. Less than half may not be truly representative. It probably would be more.
Yeah.
So.
And I think what it does is it also, this result also potentially really reinforces what this IC3 movement's all about, and actually, you know, and just reinforces the need for, and how there is a lack of counselling in schools. And this is saying, you know, if we're seeing these results from potentially just the schools that are, who've touched base with IC3, that's just maybe the tip of the iceberg at the moment.
Yeah.
And as IC,
It's on.
and as the network expands, you're going to get more and more schools in more and more countries, and I think that's going to come up. That's going to come up. So this is a really interesting result.
Okay, so most students are feeling excited. Yeah. They're also anxious. Do you see that in your school? Do they come worried? Do they come excited? Do they come, or does it keep swinging between the two? Yeah. They also feel motivated, and you know.
What is the yellow? Excuse me, sir.
Amrita, what's the yellow?
Confident. Yeah. Also maybe, you know, and in the report actually, later in the report, there are what do they feel excited about is the freedom. Yeah, so what are the students most excited about? The transition is being more independent, they're looking forward to that. Being more responsible, and also they're looking forward to a new curriculum, you know, so that's what is exciting. What's making them anxious is increase in the financial liabilities for them personally as well as for the family, because you'll see financial constraints and you know, concerns around financial budgets and financial liabilities coming up. The fact that they haven't thought enough previously, or you know, also makes them anxious. And some of them have also said the fact that they'll have a larger curriculum to deal with, that's also making them anxious. So though they're excited for the flexibility or the fact that they'll get focused subjects, not maybe all subjects that they have to do in school is exciting, but also the quantum of the curriculum or the, you know, is what is also making them anxious in some ways. Okay. This is actually interesting, and I'd like universities to chime in here, because this survey is saying that, you know, students want to a majority of the students that they want to attend in-person universities. So 57% said that they want to attend in-person college or university, because we asked them, do you think you can do virtual, you know, would that be an option? And we got very few responses there. So 5% actually of the students who surveyed indicated preference for an online or hybrid education. a lot of them said that they've not decided what they want to do yet. So you see that haven't decided also as 9.2. And then you see that here, you know, the new trend that we saw, and we haven't actually asked this before, but considering that a lot of students want to continue to study in the country, but they also are looking at universities that would give 1 semester abroad. So, you know, that's an option. And I think for institutions here, maybe looking at partnerships, you know, because that again, you'll see affordability coming in, and that could be a big reason. Maybe a lot of them don't feel ready to just move countries, right, completely. So that was sort of interesting for us to see.
So Amrita, the ones that are what like home country but semesters abroad are a separate set from the home country. It's not a subset.
It's not a subset, right? Also, you'll see that it has gone up from last year. So we had about 39% of the students who said that they would prefer to study in home countries, while 30% want to study abroad. This 30% was actually 25% last year. So for all of you who are, you know, so obviously it's seeing like the COVID impact is weaning off. That could be one. And this whole interest, and I think that also probably gave time to students to think about home country, right? Like, or, you know, be forced to look at home country, but they're back again looking at, you know, what is beyond their immediate borders in that sense. So would institutions feel that how's the trend of application and enrollments been in 2021, 2022?
We saw an 85% increase in applications.
Uh-huh.
We also saw a considerable increase in international enrollments. But there were still some students who, in the end, said, I've decided to stay in my home country. So I think the survey supports that.
And what institution are you from?
Sorry, Ohio Wesleyan in Ohio in the U.S.
Bit late now.
Sorry.
Good.
I just have a question. Was the survey specific about undergraduate or graduate?
Yes, undergraduate
Okay,
only.
undergraduate. Because I mean, I have a lot of, like in the past few days, I met with a lot of students, and many of them, even though they know that we are undergraduate focused, but they say, I'm not interested in undergraduate. Can you tell me about the graduate programs? So that could go hand in hand in the home country first, because they want the undergraduate here, but then graduate studies
Yeah,
abroad.
at least 95% of our students would be preferring to stay back in India for their undergrads.
Mhm.
So maybe they will think about studying abroad during their masters. 95% are in-house. But also this transition from doing a complete course in the home country to 1 semester that we were talking about, 1 semester or a year abroad, that is sounding to be a lucrative thing. That's what we understand from the students. But that's sounding to be lucrative. So if we can have better understanding of those, and that's what it seems to us right now. So more of such collaborations, I think, would be good.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I have experience of working at a higher ed institution earlier, and I realized that even if partnerships exist, access to that is not easy, right?
Yes.
So even then, it's like for the top performing students, etc., or, you know, sometimes even if semester abroad is available, either it comes with a cost, which again limits access in some way, or it comes performance based, which again is limiting. So I think we really need to think about, as higher education institutions in different countries, and we did use the term home country because this is not just India, though we had the majority of the respondents from India. But I think we need to think about what could be the nature of partnerships, and how can we offer a semester abroad or a year abroad to more students than, or how can they make, are we going to offer something that's very niche and specialized, are we going to offer it, are we going to make some form of exchange, even if not a semester abroad, but maybe some kind of an exchange project or a research project with international students or faculty, right? So it's also about how you're going to bring access to that. There is, of course, interest, but how are you going to make that accessible is
or
again.
a kind of virtual course or a project that they can do online. In these 4 years of their undergrad in India, if there are certain universities which will offer students to apply for a virtual project or a course
I
that they
think
can
maybe
offer.
an exchange program will be more beneficial for these kind of students, because ultimately what they want is, first thing is an experience, and that too very affordable experience. So exchange programs can be good idea for these kind of students. I
Yes,
think
so you have all
universities
the
can come
universities
up with,
listening into you.
yeah.
Saying, you make that happen, right?
So universities can think about offering those kind of programs.
And that would be after they are in a
In
home
a
country
AIS,
institution.
yes,
So
yeah.
then there's ISEP, study abroad opportunities, and all these exchange opportunities.
At my institution, I've seen a rise in current international students participating in our study abroad, because study abroad is actually part of our IPS office. So a good number of them are, and it's because the institution went out of their way to make sure that the study abroad scholarship application could also be possible for those students. So I think it really has to be part of the mission of the institution. And then I like to talk about study abroad at the very beginning during the admissions consultations, because I'm like, hey, you're studying abroad here, but there's more opportunities there. And I always see them bright up a little bit, because they always think like, okay, I'm doing this one step, but oh, there could be more. And I think that really helps them when they're looking at options after they graduate. They've started that thought process in the very beginning.
What institution are you from?
I'm with Millersville University in Pennsylvania, US.
I think what's also going to be really interesting, and this would be really good to see in sort of from a longitudinal study point, is how does these dynamics and determinants change, obviously with the implementation of NEP coming here in India, but more importantly, I think, is the recent announcement by UCG about the allowing Indian institutions to now do dual programs or dual degrees as well. And I think this is going to be an interesting point to really understand, is then does that change the preference, or those results change over time when Indian institutions and students will have more access to these kind of programs, which might be 3+1, 2+2s, whatever form they make. But then knowing that, with that they can either get credits back, or they can do, they can go there and do whatever they want. So it'll be really interesting to see these results sort of, from a longitudinal perspective also, maybe future research.
Right. Like first year students, now that the students that took the survey and now are first year in their home country, what do they think? Are they still thinking stay here or go abroad?
Yeah, so I think that would be probably make up for the scope of following subsequent years' surveys, and I'm going to make a note of that, to sort of make sure that I don't know whether we'll get the same population, but maybe we'll, at least get hold of some of the students at their undergrad. This has been one of the highlights actually of the report, and you'll see this coming across consistently. So 79% of the kids actually said that it's important to know details of the family's financial budgets for higher education for them to be able to make decisions, right? However, if you see, only 23.5 actually discuss or have access to this information in detail from their parents and families. Some say yes, like a brief idea, they've spoken about it, but that doesn't sort of help. And what was interesting is that we thought that it was basically maybe grade 9 and 10 who wouldn't know, but if we break this down, it was about 59% of grade 11 and 12 students who had a view on what the financial budget is, and 57% of grade 9 and 10. So there was only a marginal increase, from this percentage of people who said that they have access to some level, right? So if we sliced that further between grades, there wasn't much of a difference between grade 9, 10, and 11, 12, which is kind of surprising because you're closer to making a decision. You don't want to be left hanging, or you don't want to be applying to multiple regions, but I think that's what is ending up, happening. What have been some of the counselors' experience in parents, are they open to discussing financial information with their children or with you, or what do you think would be the reasons for this? Sure.
So something we do in our school is what we do from grade 8 is we talk about costs of studying everywhere, India, abroad, and we break it down by country as on date. And then each year we sort of repeat the financial data, telling parents that you have to be aware of the costs and maybe start some planning or have discussions with your child about how far you're willing to spend on the bachelor's degree, and start those conversations now, because you can plan accordingly and so can your child. And in the 11th, we absolutely make it a point to break it down further. And every individual conversation with parents is also about budget as one very, very important criteria, and costs. And we also flag the financial aid need right up front as well, saying that there are opportunities, whether it's India, whether it's abroad, depending on your budget and costs. So have a personal conversation with us. We understand you don't want to do it in forum and seminar, absolutely not. Come in, check with us at any point. So we keep flagging this so that nobody is in doubt, neither student nor parent, on where they are on that cost map and what decisions are aligned to that. So there are no surprises, and there's no we'll try everything then decide. Some are clear. This is actually the budget. We'll stretch this much, and so therefore but we make it clear from literally 8th grade that you've got to look at the costs. They're important.
And are parents able to respond to that?
They respond. And then many will ask further questions, because suddenly they see the numbers up on the board, and then, some will ask guarded questions, some will ask open questions, some will ask questions about after that, when you spend this money, what happens, so it opens up that box.
Great, thanks for sharing that.
Sorry,
I used to Mumbai.
Okay, I'm from City Montessori School, Lucknow, and recently I've started working there. So from this semester, what we have just taken as a small initiative, when students are interested to apply for a study abroad, I give them a form. I designed a form for them and asking them what are their preferences, whether affordability will be a constraint or something. And then at the end of the form, I ask them to take their parents' consent and a class teacher's consent and their in-charge's consent, and then my counselor's consent is there at the end. So when they are taking consent from everyone is in loop. They know what they're going to do, and they're approving of it, and hence the students go forward with it. So that can be a small thing we can do.
That could be a small,
Yeah.
slip that in every time you sort of,
It's a form. You jot down some points, why they're interested, why should a university select them, something. So it's easier for us to find out.
Yeah.
Are they really motivated?
Have you had parents who encourage their kids to say, okay, apply. If you get through a really top tier university, we'll think about it.
Or if scholarships are there.
The child says that even though my parents are financially grounded, I have to go through a scholarship. I won't depend on my parents. If I get a scholarship, I'll go abroad.
Yeah.
But we have those parents.
Yeah.
Who say, we won't talk about the budget. You apply, we'll see what happens.
But it's really interesting for me to see that, I think it'll come in the conversation, so we'll keep that comment there. We're also running a little behind time, but we'll catch up. So the qualities desired by students and counselors, I love this slide, because only the top two talk about what we keep harping on or what we prioritize, right, which is knowledge and experience, which is really the technical skills in that sense. All others are actually soft skills, and we tend to separate career counseling from counseling without realizing that counseling is still attached to decisions of careers in colleges. So I think this was really a slide that, was really, something that I'm taking home in that sense, that they want people who are listeners, they want you think about why would trustworthiness come up in something like this, right? But we're not talking about personal issues. I'm not talking about identity, or I'm not talking about, a sexual orientation, etc. Upfront, it may come in the conversation, you know, as you sort of build the rapport and talk about decisions, or talk about the process, you know. But this was really, you know, something that's interesting. Also, I know you're taking pictures, but the whole report is available on the IC3 Institute website, so it is accessible to everyone, and it'll also come in your thank you emails for attending the conference, so you can have take your time to read the 40-page report. Yeah. Okay, I don't know whether we can expand this, but this is again something that stood out. So the blue, it's the same question. The blue part are students who had access to counselors, and the red is those who did not have access to counselors. And this is about impact of counseling in the whole transition, that are students feeling confident of the transition, so that 60% for those who have counselors and only 12% of those who don't have counselors. And this in numbers, in raw data, the difference is considerable. The students who had counselors felt more motivated, they felt lesser afraid. So you see afraid is 10% here, it's 8% here. So you can see that the impact of counseling is sort of building up clearly, right? Moving to the counselor survey, any comments?
Good question, ma'am.
Yes.
Do they make when they make decision of higher education, how much is the career path in mind? How many of them are doing higher education for the joy of learning? Do you understand my question?
I got it, I got it.
Or how much, I mean, if that says, because I didn't really ask you what is your sample size, but any insights from that? Because
Yeah.
I feel, when this is from my dipstick surveys, it's very much, if you look at the Indian scenario, it's too much career driven.
Mm-hmm.
So we have like to hear it, anything came out.
We'll
of
have
the
that
surveys.
come up. So
Thanks.
it may not answer your question fully, but you will see that placements
Yeah.
so that sort of is an outcome.
The reason is, I think counselors play a big role in changing that notion, giving them the right direction, that higher education is not only for preparing for a career. It should prepare them for a job, clearly, but what else?
Yeah. Okay, so with the counselor survey, and I think this is Gurpreet's slide where he was talking about how more people are coming into the fold, right? So if you saw the previous slide in the student survey, they said they value experience. If you go back to the conversation before that, we said less than 50% of the schools have counselors. So the ones that are, you clearly see that the level of experience, the number of years of experience, 33% maximum are in the 1 to 2 year bracket, right? So Gurpreet wanted,
Amrita, we can't read the yellow and light blue. What numbers are those?
even I can't read them when they're displayed on the slide. So 5 to 10 years is yellow, and more than 10 years is the light blue. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so look, I think this is really interesting as well, results. So, but it also just shows that, okay, it goes back to the point we had earlier about obviously access to career counsellors, and this is probably one of the associated impacts of that as well, that career counselling is slowly starting to actually come into these institutions or into these schools, and we're seeing that. And so I think this is something that you'll obviously see progressively change as we sort of continue this this survey as well. But again, it goes back to, and as mentioned, is I think if you want to then sort of see if there's alignment with the mission of IC3, this slide really does provide a very good tangible outcome to say, okay, the mission is going towards its mission, and there's green shoots right there for you.
Yeah. So this was the question on the ratio.
My question is, do you know the percentage of private schools versus public schools?
It's in the report. They're more in the private. Yeah.
Thank
yeah. This is the counselor to student ratio. It is more than 1:100. And the desired, so we had two questions on what is the current ratio and what is the desired ratio. Desired ratio, we got maximum responses of 1:50, whereas it is 1:100, and we didn't even have a question of more than 100 because we just felt after that it's, I don't know, So concerns raised by parents or students, you'll again see financial support as the biggest. And then, of course, there was anxiety over examination timelines. And I'll have to read the yellow from my report here, which is uncertainty about the timelines of the application. Yeah. So the fact that they kept shifting this year. So I think very typical of this year or the year before. And it's interesting because you see health and safety concerns come up, which we actually didn't see earlier. So again, maybe something more closely aligned with the pandemic situation. The next is another slide that I really like, which is the pressure felt by students to give them the best fit, to give the best guidance. So 20% feel that there's a lot of pressure, 40% do feel pressure. Yeah, there are very few who say no pressure at all, right? So, and I think this comes to the question of how are we talking to students and parents about the role of the counselor? Are they going to make the decisions? Are they going to get you closer to making decisions? Are they going to provide you the information and let you take the decisions? So it's about the approach that counselors are taking. It also, of course, also comes from the ratio. I mean, that sort of impacts everything that we've spoken about, right?
I also feel it comes from the thing that the parents do not know much.
Absolutely.
Parents have relatively no idea. So they depend entirely on the counselor. And if it's somebody whom they trust, whom they feel that they could rely on, the pressure goes up. And there are parents who completely depend on counselors. And as you say, as you think it's right, because you've known our children, they've been in the school, you've known them. So that, and we don't know anything. Put together,
absolutely,
that thing goes on to the counselor, and that's what makes it a little more difficult thing for her to do.
Absolutely.
And I think added to that is when parents go outside of the school to find more information, they speak to their friends, they speak to people, and that complicates the situation further.
They choose a college and then the friends say no, that is, give some negative effect on it.
Yeah. All I can say, look, let's hold that thought because there's some interesting results that are going to come out next about the influences as well. Which I think is really interesting, considering that 60% of school counselors feel pressure, and then obviously how much does their guidance impact on the decision as well? So there's some interesting results will come after this as well.
Okay, this was about patterns of choices. So most likely and least likely to pursue education abroad, what sort of subjects they come from, and you see science taking, most likely, science students tend to pursue education overseas, followed by the humanities and the commerce. And I think it could just also be because a lot of the countries have sort of favorable rules to stay back options for sciences. So, but it's of course something to think about, right? And also maybe access to science-related education, the quality of the education within the countries as well, so those are, and also what's not on the slide are the gender distribution within this, so which again says that male students tend to take more of the engineering and technology-related programs, whereas girls tend to take more of the medical, design, and humanities. I think we may think that this trend doesn't exist, but of course the report did bring that across. Gurpreet, institution survey, over to you.
Yes. Okay, so this was the slide, and we obviously we just discussed about the role of the council and the pressure. And so one of the things that we really wanted to obviously understand was, okay, what do institutions really understand? Who's really making the decisions around the student? And what was really interesting is parents and students came out on top, but parents actually, they're very close between parents and students, but parents were perceived, I use the word perceived in this, by institutions to be the most important decision makers as well. And this is where, so that gravitas is still there. And this is what I was talking about in terms of then councillors sort of became number 3. Which was really interesting, and this was going back to my point earlier about is how 60% of counsellors, school counsellors, are feeling pressure, yet institutions are not probably perceiving them as an important decision maker as well. So that's an interesting contradiction to, I would say, to a little bit to just some of the findings as well. But again, it's also really interesting is I think the feedback from alumni is, okay, friends and alumni, it's there, but it's not that big. I think more and more parents and more students are doing their own research, independent research, and then sort of making their decision based on that as well. So that, yes, then again, this is the university perspective on that, and it's probably some of that data around, especially around the friends and families or the feedback from school alumni, is probably because they're probably seeing an uptake in direct engagement in communications from the students or the parents.
And again, I think for me, when I come from a school, or the way I look at it from the IC3 Institute perspective, I'm really looking at what the role of the counsellor, how is that being, articulated, how is that coming, and how are we articulating the role of the counsellor, and what is the counsellor actually doing on ground, and what is the impact of that in the student and parent body. I think for me it sort of raises questions there, and of course they could be looking at the counsellor as an information provider, but maybe not as a factor of influence. You had a question.
For this exact question, did they have the counselor part to it? Because I know I've heard a lot from counselors that they want institutions to bring alumni, current students to the table when we're doing communications. And from this survey, it seems like institutions don't see it as very impactful. But it would be really interesting to see this question from the counselor, like who do they break down as the most influential parts? Because as I'm trying to tailor my communication plans, making sure that I'm giving the information that's needed, this would be helpful to hear from the other side of the table.
I think we've got some of that information unpacked in the report.
What page? I have it here.
Oh, you have the, okay. Okay. Is it in? No, it's actually not in there, sorry. But I think, look, I've seen some of the data as well, but yeah, there was a slight variance, obviously, in terms of what the counsellors perceived and what the institutions perceived. So I did observe a bit of a mismatch there.
I'd love to see that.
Okay, so this one was all about then is obviously access to, and we asked the institutions, what kind of assistance do they want to seek from schools and career counsellors? And what was really interesting was I think the top 2 things was obviously just providing topics for workshops, but also, and I think what was really interesting was calendar visibility. And I think I was at the IC3 Institute graduation, the reception yesterday as well, and I think this theme came up, is that as we do get a lot of, and this was coming from a career counsellor, that we do get a lot of requests from universities to do, workshops in the school and things like that. But we also want to see potentially the opportunity for our students to experience something a bit different as well. So that was interesting because that actually mixes up both of these as well. So I think a bit of feedback, obviously, to the counsellors in the room is, look at working with the institutions on identifying key topics that you believe are going to be quite influential, who are going to be quite topical, and then students really want to, and that you think your students do want to learn more about, and then be able to communicate that with institutions. So I think institutions are very keen to then be able to then find a very, very customized workshop to then assist in terms of value adding to the engagement as well.
Okay, I want to answer that question. So if you could look at page 16, if you have the report, it says when it comes to recommending university options to students, counselors said what do they highlight, right, when they're having. So if you see, family preference also figures fairly low on that. And this is the first time we've done a counselor survey, so we probably wouldn't have covered it as directly as you're asking. If you go to the 2021 report, actually last year, which is also on the website, we've asked students, who influences them the most. So maybe that would, that question, yeah, in the 2021. Well, okay, so now we come to, some of the themes of the report that we had. And the first was the access and the visibility. And you can see here, do students have dedicated counseling support? I've already shown you this data, right? Like I've spoken to you about it. So this is kind of it's not alarming, right? But it's also not truly representative because, like I said, it's mostly in the IC3 network in that sense. The alarming thing was that students are not aware whether they have. I don't know, right? So that's a bit of a thing that we need to fix. And I think that talks about, is the counselor sort of overloaded because of the ratio? Or is it that the counselor is sitting pretty in one office in one corner of the school and is not sort of visible enough for the right reasons? And that's something for us in schools to really think about.
In the report, does it break down which schools have counseling kind of calendarized as a curriculum versus those where it's based on when the counselor calls the student in their sessions?
Yeah, so it will, yeah, it's there. It's the report says that most schools offer counseling which is need-based. Yeah. Yeah. Then when we have access to institutions, we said when there's so many, everyone seems to be raising concerns about finances, right? So have institutions, 53% said yes. Have institutions reduced fee? No, and Gurpreet said, Gurpreet, you want to mention your comment here when you spoke about how financial aid was maybe a way of...
Yeah, so I think tuition fees, decreasing tuition fees is quite an interesting topic in many institutions. Really what we're doing at my institution, I'm saying that shamelessly, and I'm sure that other institutions are doing the same thing as well.
The second theme was really the impact and support structures. So this is actually what again, which could probably go back to the mismatch of the importance of the counselor really and the role of the counselor is, what do students need counselor support for? So of course the top one is getting information about universities, colleges and curriculum, but the other is really the soft skill of understanding personal strength, weaknesses and doing an analysis of that. And how many of us are, as counselors, bringing that in? Or do we have because of the ratio, do we have the bandwidth to do that? Do we have the inclination to do that, right? And also you see that at the bottom it says, sharing your emotions and experiences during the process. I have been guilty of, a lot of times as a counselor when I was back in school to say that when students have come up and they're like, I'm confused, I don't know what to do, I'll just say, it's okay, it's going to get better. I don't think I've been present enough to say, okay, what is making you feel confused? Is it bothering you? To what level is the confusion? I think I've sort of said, okay, I've acknowledged the feeling, but I don't think I've been able to do anything about it. So I think this is something that, really sort of was like a reality check, saying that you can't really ignore the feelings associated or the emotions in the whole process as well. And they do seek mentorship and guidance, and getting help in the transition process also did come up. challenges for counselors in the profession is lack of clarity in the student's perception towards counseling. So obviously, what are we saying? What is the role and responsibility of the counselor? And I think that sort of comes from what the school, the management thinks about it, what are their expectations, student, parent expectations, and how are we really bringing this clearly to the students. And of course, lack of planning and foresight from students. And I don't know if you've seen this meme which comes up every application season, which is, you know, a counselor holding a coffee mug saying that your procrastination is not my emergency. So, you know, but we put timelines, you put processes in place. So your number of students, number of last minute applications probably reduced over the years, but, you know, that is still there. Areas that counselors need support in, so research and information gathering. So I think if you have, universities, if you have resources, that would be helpful. Building a professional network, and, you know, for that I think just sort of talking to each other, breaking, you know, maybe visiting schools together, you know, bringing counselors of a city together, etc., is something that would help. Building relationships with universities, so I think platforms like IC3 would probably, you know, be useful. Transitions was the last theme. I've already shared this about you. What do they feel excited about? What do they feel nervous about, or, you know, anxious about? And this is again interesting. Students who had access to counselors were more aware, 69% were more aware of what the transition could look like, as opposed to 60% here. And not aware are 12% here and 18% there. So I think counseling is in its really sort of making its way through. I'm going to skip this slide. Similarities were really the financial information and concerns that came up across. The gaps are of course in the amount of time that they're able to get and the role, and, you know, how can they make the best use of this resource or of, you know, the relationship with the counselor. And also the institution's ranking lower, you know, the fact that universities think that counselors' role, you know, both, there seems to be some mismatch in what the counselor's trying to do, how institutions are perceiving it, how schools, you know, students are perceiving it. I'm going to just let this be on the slide, and because I know time is up. So, you know, these are some of the recommendations. They're available on the report. Maybe we could just have 2-3 minutes of discussion or any specific question. So you clearly see a recommendation of include budget discussions in the, you know, as you speak to parents, you know, how to involve parents is another, because you have this whole overbearing parents, then least interested parents, etc. Also, you know, if the counselors could also train themselves to be able to talk to students about their emotions, or at least entertain that conversation so that students feel heard and develop that rapport. Yes, ma'am, you had a question.
Yeah, considering the last point, involvement of alumni. So mine is a school from Mangalore on the coastal belt, and we are new and we have just started with grade 11 with the IGCSE curriculum. Now my children are confused, a few of them, to which universities they have to go and all that. That's why I'm here. And then while thinking about this alumni, we won't be having, because this is a new batch and all that. Is it possible for the universities to have some testimonials of students studying there, and that can be, you know, given to us and shared with them?
So I exactly know what
yeah, and they have, you know, a stigma that there are no other courses beyond medical engineering and CA. That's it. So creating this awareness is very important for us, and the role of counselor is really challenging.
Yeah.
So what I
You're
know,
talking to someone who was the first batch of their own school, so you know, I know what that feels like not having. But so you are,
For you, what you do, I think this is the problem that many schools would face, that they don't have alumni. But what you should try or ask universities is, do you have students from this region?
Yeah.
So we did that. So there was somebody coming from Koppal, which is the other side of Karnataka. So we connected a student at Koppal with a student who is in the university from Koppal. So that works. That's what you could try.
So, and I think there was that question on the alumni, if it doesn't really feature as an important this thing, and you know, you face that counselors want you to bring in alumni. I know as a school counselor, when you brought in alumni either from that region or particularly from that school, or just data of the number of applications you receive from the school, I think that is more helpful to me as a counselor, because sometimes I don't have 100% visibility on that. So particularly if I only get to know the offer or the final placement, I don't necessarily get to know as a counselor whether I applied there, you know, students. So I think that is something that would be more helpful to see if a university is increasing in popularity with my set of students in that sense.
Ma'am, can you go back to your other slide of recommendation? I really liked this one. Yeah. See, one area that you could add, I'm just thinking about here, is you see the regulatory changes that's happening in the country. I'm not sure about other countries, but India is changing in a very fast pace with NEP coming in, UGC talking various things. There's something called National Council for Teacher Education, they wanting to change. So that could be one area that counselors need to be updated. Will all 3-year programs change to 4 years in India? Things like that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. You all have at the back of the report, actually, it's our emails. So if you can come up with more recommendations, I mean, this is just 5 people getting together to do a report. If we have more inputs, if you have suggestions for inclusions or, you know, themes for next year, please feel free to write to us. We'd be more than happy. So typically we do start with a think tank kind of a thing. You know, we write to ideation, you know, to some people of different regions, etc. So you could write to me, you could write to Gurpreet, and we'd be happy to, you know, look at that as well.